And because many sometimes don't even think that their partner's the abuser, they think they are because their partner has convinced them that they're the reason for the problems in the marriage or the relationship.
So would like an extreme example be like, well, you made me hit you.
Yeah.
It's your behavior that made me hit you. And I'm not saying that
if you didn't do this, I wouldn't treat you this way.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest, Shannon Higgins, on the Tool for This Shit podcast. I'm Angie S., the founder of angies.com. That's angie-s.com. Link in the show notes. Well, I'm a health coach. So if you want to work with me, you can get in touch via the website or email me directly at hello@angie-s.com. So if you like this show, please rate, review, subscribe on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or if you're listening from any of the other platforms, whichever way you show love on them is how you can support this show. Share it with your friends. The more you share it, the more people listen and subscribe to it. It really goes a long way to support this show. And it only takes you like 2 seconds and it's completely free for you to do. So how are we doing today? How are we doing? I hope you're doing well. I hope, wherever it is that you are in the world, whatever the situation is at the moment, I hope you're doing well. And if you're not doing well, I hope you're just letting yourself feel that way. Just let it take its wave over your body and just feel, when you need to feel crappy. And so you can come back out of it again much faster than if you just like pushed it down. So I do want to say just a quick warning. This can be quite a triggering episode. Today is part 2 of a 3-part mini-series around gaslighting, narcissism, and hidden abuse. So today we cover actually why someone becomes a narcissist, what's the psychology behind it, and why people don't just leave them, but actually side with them. And so that is both in personal relationship, romantic relationships, and also work relationship. And we cover as well how to leave a narcissist as safely as possible once you've decided to do that. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, which was episode 28, it was released on the 24th of February this year, 2020, which was called, Did You Just Gaslight Me? I highly encourage you to have a listen because it really gives you some great basis on what exactly is a narcissist. Like, how do we define one? So today we go like how one becomes one, right? But we actually over there, we define what is one. We do a quick recap today, but that one really gives you an in-depth understanding of what is a narcissist, what is gaslighting, what's hidden abuse, and also understanding that gaslighting and hidden abuse is not necessarily performed by narcissists. So that's a very important discernment. And so we go over that on that first episode. But of course, if you don't want to do that, you can safely keep on listening on this one because those 3 episodes that we recorded do work as standalone episodes as well. As a side note, originally the episode that was released in February was going to be a one-off episode and it was called Did You Just Gaslight Me? But it is such a big topic. And when I spoke with Shannon, I just really took a shine to her and I'm really happy that she agreed to do another 2 episodes. So number 2, which is today, and number 3, which will be released next week. So today we cover what makes a narcissist and how to leave one once you're ready. And so next week will be part 3, which will be on recovery from narcissistic abuse and learning how to trust again, which will be released next week as episode number 38. So I really hope this is helpful for you. All I want is to bring awareness and discernment on all these different topics that, I bring on each week. And I really hope that this is something you can walk away with. Don't hesitate to reach out to me with whatever it is that you've learned from it, what you liked, what you like to hear more of. This is as much your show as it is mine. So, it wouldn't exist if you weren't listening to it. So I'm just really grateful for that. Big thank you. You kick ass. So love it. And obviously, if anything for you comes up while you're listening to these episodes around this, it's quite a triggering topic, obviously. So if anything that comes up for you, please do reach out to a professional that can help you. There's also organizations, you can call up for free. If you're feeling you starting to down spiral and it's like really triggering for you. Or you can also, of course, reach out to Shannon Higgins, who is on the show. She's a professional. She's a professional therapist, so she'll be able to help you around that. And yeah, I just really hope this is something that's going to be helpful for you. So without further ado, let's begin. Welcome back, Shannon.
Thank you. I am so glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
I love your voice, by the way. It's such a soothing voice, and I love the I don't know how you call it.
The Southern twang.
That's it. The Southern twang. Yeah, love it. So yeah, thank you so much for coming back on today. It's interesting because actually we had already been talking and scheduling to have you come back on before the world, came to a lockdown. But I think, these are obviously still relevant topics. People are still dealing with, relationships. We can't escape them. And, obviously we talk a lot about, with you, we talked about, narcissism and gaslighting and stuff. And so, I was just thinking, at the moment we can't escape our relationships. What are we going to say? I'm too busy. I can't talk. I'm on the train. I'm at work. I'm at someone else. Where are you going?
Yeah.
Unless it's Postman Pat or the cashier at the store, you ain't going anywhere. So obviously, some of us obviously working from home and are still busy, but most people, have more time on their hands. And so I think this is obviously a time of, I guess recollection, regrouping, figuring out, and obviously some listeners may also still be having to be in isolation with people that aren't too healthy for them. So before we dive into this and have a chat, for those who haven't listened to you before, please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do.
I am a licensed professional counselor, supervisor. And I live in Plano, Texas, and it is a suburb of Dallas, Texas. We're famous for that lovely show, Dallas.
Yeah.
And and I have a private practice, and so I do counseling for all ages, basically 10 and up. My specialties are working with mood disorders, and as far as psychosocial issues, I work with relational abuse. And so what that covers is, narcissistic abuse, but I prefer to call it hidden abuse because I'm a clinician and we are not able to diagnose people we don't work with. I call it narcissistic abuse on a platform like yours just because most people are more familiar. They use it more often as narcissistic abuse.
Yeah, no, I think it's good that you introduced the term hidden abuse, because that way, well, I think two things. One is, it brings discernment, but also two, I think when we falsely diagnose or falsely interpret information as, it can have obviously repercussions. So let's say, for example, someone thinks they are being gaslighted without understanding gaslighting, or they think something is super abusive when actually something is maybe just a misunderstanding or mistake. Being able to discern those two things is going to help people not feeling falsely traumatized in a way. I'm not wording it well, but it's I think it's important to make those discernment, because I think understanding someone's intention behind, whether it's malicious or not, makes a big difference on the impact it has on someone, right?
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, what my job is to really take the time with my clients to make that discernment. Because, we're bound by ethics in our states. And so we have these, code of ethics that we follow. And so we really want to adhere to them very strictly. And so that's why most therapists will call it hidden abuse. When we speak in public, we'll just kind of use hidden abuse interchangeably with narcissistic abuse, and we would then define it like I am with you.
Yeah.
And so, and then most people are also familiar with, domestic violence, emotional abuse. And so they're all, distinctly different, but they have one thing in common. And it's just that people are being, treated with unfair ways of shame. They're, either being, hurt physically, financially, spiritually. And now we even say litigation abuse.
What does that mean, litigation abuse?
So when dealing with divorce, what happens is that the person who has the cluster B or the personality disorder or who is toxic will actually take their partner to divorce court or family court over and over again to punish their partner.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So like delaying signing the papers, delaying so that they keep the other person suffering. Is that?
They'll do that. And then the other is that they'll actually try to modify the decree, or they'll want to do a modification of the custody arrangements. Okay. And some people are, 2 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out, and they're still having to go to family court because their, partner is still trying to punish them.
Yeah, no, that's torture for someone. Because obviously now, just to bring, obviously now today, like we're recording, what's the date today? Let me have a look at the date. Today we are Thursday, 26th of March. Okay, so just to give sort of, I guess, context for people. So with 26th of March, I'm sort of, there's this thing about everyone, now being in isolation. And, I have sort of lightly joked around saying, this is not to be mean, obviously, but because obviously couples living together is going to be very challenging. And I was like, divorce season is upon us. It's like great time for the singles. I think being single, I think don't feel bad if you're single, because means you don't have to be obviously dealing with someone's pandemic trauma on top of it. There's, it's nice to be with someone else, but I think a lot of people are also probably like a bit, struggling when they're not, dealing with their families and their kids. And it's a lot to deal with, obviously, for everyone. But I think people are either like couples that either, if they make it through this time, they might as well get married if they believe in marriage, because they're good to go, right? They're like, they've survived this time. It's pretty good. That's, it's a big feat. But there's obviously going to be people who are going to realize a lot of things, probably being in isolation with their partner. And so in terms of like, for you, have you noticed what does this time in isolation has meant for your patients? Have you seen something change, before we dive into like what a narcissist is, I just want to bring it into like today. Like, have you seen a change for people on your end from your professional experience?
Angie, I've seen some very interesting changes, and it's a good question. One thing that my colleagues and I, we're definitely in regular communication because we're trying to support each other while we're, shouldering support for our clients. And one thing that we really recognize is that the clients that we're working with that do, actually they're in trauma recovery. They're so accustomed to chaos that they're handling this pandemic smoothly.
Wow.
This is, it's almost eerie.
Yeah.
And so they're like, this is not a big deal at all.
Yeah.
And so, and that would make sense, because if someone's, dealt with trauma or chaos for most of their life, then while this is a, once in a lifetime thing that we haven't dealt with before, it still has the same characteristics as, trauma that they've dealt with.
Yeah. They've got the tools. They've got the muscle.
They've got the tools. If they don't, they, are still engaged in their therapy. So they feel like that they have this safety net. And so they're really not panicking. On the other hand, we're getting lots of new patients And there are people who don't typically experience anxiety, but this pandemic has created a lot of it. And it's because people are accidentally getting engulfed in the panic.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with they're paying too much attention at what's happening in the grocery stores. And, they're listening to the news too much, the social media. So the exposure has been, over the top for them.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of that. And so it's just a matter of them reaching out for support and kind of being talked off the ledge.
Yeah. And I think what you said is so important with the news and the grocery store and stuff. I think, so for example, going to the grocery store, for me, it was heartbreaking to witness. And it's hard not to be scooped up in the panic. And obviously with what I do, I had to be aware of the health stuff and, it's not something I couldn't just go into a bunker and shelter away. But at the same time, I would notice that if I was getting too many links sent to me, about, the very fear mongering and also the news, the media didn't always do a great job portraying what was going on. And sometimes they were undermining it. Sometimes they were dramatizing it. So it's very hard for anyone who's not used to things like that to look at stats. It can create a lot of anxiety for people. And so I had to also make a choice to only deal with where I could help. And also I noticed that when I'm at home, for example, after a couple of days, if I decide not to look at, news and just filtering a lot of the stuff, that's not going to be helpful. I feel so much better. And I think this is now, like you said, it's almost like a time where it's like a time where we learn to sort of just to recenter and having to pull away from noise, because before this pandemic, we were always, a lot of us are just tapped into everything, social media all the time, news all the time. And now if we keep doing this, it can really create an added layer of just too much information, unfiltered information that's not helpful. And I think it's like that thing of, it is part of maybe of mental health as well. When if we are, don't know how it's like for your patients, but it's important to be able to step back and just, I guess, assess the situation. Like, how would you advise that?
So one thing that I really recommend for them is to definitely take a step back. If, one thing that we've talked about before is that knowledge is empowerment. So the fact that our government has been keeping people informed, that has been very helpful, because humanity does not do well with the unknown. So that has helped.
Yeah.
And so if someone wants to, be educated on what's happening with the statistics, they can go online, right? And they can go look at, WHO, the World Health Organization, and kind of see what's happening. And then the CDC. If they want, they can turn on their, local news. But then I would say that's it. Refrain from that.
100% agree. I think this is because I was fine up until I was too much information sent my way, just due to the fact of what I do. And it's like, I literally just go, and this is what I would advise as well. If someone, sometimes those articles can be harder to read for people, but I would only get my information from Harvard, Oxford, and then World Health Organization. And then there's one stats I looked at, which was called Information is Beautiful. That's it. And, and I've got, in terms of the news headlines, I have a friend who is always plugged in anyway, and he just gives me the headlines on the need to know basis now, the governmental guidelines, for example, now because it changed everywhere. So now in the UK, they've changed, the restriction and stuff. And so things like that. But I just can't, because otherwise it becomes like you said, it's hard to support other people if you're not looking after yourself. And like you're saying, shouldering, it's like a parallel, I think you mentioned the word parallel processing once. And it really is that. And so now obviously, because you're, what you were talking about earlier about hidden abuse and narcissism, I'd love to go into that, unless there was something else you wanted to say maybe about these times before we go into that.
No, I mean, just one thing would be that people have talked about, and, this is where social media can be good, is that there's a lot of, life coaches, there are people that are actually giving great advice about, how to stay healthy.
Yeah.
And doing things like guided meditation. And so I would encourage people to avoid the panic, but to actually look at things that are anecdotal.
Yes.
And so, because if you focus on positive, constructive things, that actually changes your neural pathways.
Yes.
So that I would just, add is for people to look for, people who are offering that kind of advice.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because in a way, we are, it's like, the social media. Okay. So one side of it is, if we didn't have social media, we probably wouldn't have been as panicked, right? Because we wouldn't have known as much. We probably have, we wouldn't have been overburdened. We would have like the news once a day, like at 7 p.m., like it used to be. Like, you had 4 channels on the TV, you watch the news, you stay at home, where, so there'll be less panic, but at the same time, there'll be more isolation. So now with social media, we get too much information almost, but at the same time, I say social media, internet. So it's what I meant, internet. But at the same time now, we don't have to be isolated fully. Like, we can meet online. We can do these Zoom calls. We can do I can meet with you now here on the podcast. It's not the same as in person, obviously. But we can actually, we don't have to be
alone.
It's
a damn good substitute.
Exactly. I wish I could say it in that voice.
You can practice.
It's a damn good
there you
substitute.
Go. That was really good, Angie.
So I'd love to, let's go into the narcissism stuff, and just it won't be totally narcissism, but because, like you said, a lot of people use that term. I want you to, just in case people haven't heard your episode that we recorded a while back, could you give us a quick recap on what defines a narcissist?
Yes. So we have a spectrum. We call it the narcissistic spectrum. And we have a diagnostic manual called the DSM-5. And so that is narcissistic personality disorder. And so that's the pathology of narcissism. And so there are 9 criteria for the personality disorder. And so I'll read these. There's a grandiose sense of self. There's a preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, and ideal love. This person believes that he or she is special or unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people or institutions. Requires excessive admiration, has a sense of entitlement, is interpersonally exploitive, lacks empathy, is envious of others or believes others are envious of them, shows arrogant behaviors. And so that's in our manual, and that's the pathology. And so narcissism we see as a defense mechanism. And so there's healthy narcissism, and then there is the dark triad. And healthy narcissism is on one end of the spectrum. So if you were to imagine a line, so on the far left, let's say, is healthy narcissism, and on the far right is the dark triad. And what that is that's antisocial personality disorder, psychopathy, sociopathy. So people have heard of like the malignant narcissist or the Machiavellian narcissist. So those are to the extreme right. And then in the middle, we have what we would call the narcissistic traits. And that is a good place to put in the middle, because if someone has narcissistic traits, there is opportunity for change. In order to have the traits, we say that they can have 1 to 4 of the personality disorder criteria.
Yeah. And so the criteria was things like the grandiosity, the fantasies, being special, no empathy. Those are the criteria you mean, right?
And so they can have as little as 1 of those criteria or up to 4. And so from that middle mark, having the traits to the left, there is opportunity, like I said, for change. And this is very good for people to know, because let's just say they're in a relationship, and usually people don't know that they have, a partner that's toxic until they're already in the relationship, because of the, love bombing and all of that seductive behavior in the beginning. Now, to the right of the traits, the character disorder is more pronounced. And so
when you said the right, that's like the dark triad, when you have like sociopathy.
The closer you get to the dark triad, you start having more of the disordered behavior. So the least likely you have any opportunity for change.
So on the dark triad, when it's like, really malignant, you can have anything from 5 to all the 9 criteria.
Yes.
And so on that right hand side, the dark triad, is that people like, for example, serial killers, for example.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And then on the left hand side, the healthy side, is that anyone who has like one trait? Like how many traits because obviously you said there was healthy narcissism on the left. So how many traits would a healthy person have?
So we, need to have that defense mechanism that has us paying attention for our own safety. But at the same time, if you have healthy narcissism, you're also wanting to look out for others. And so a hallmark of healthy behavior is to have that kind of flexibility. So that is what you'll see as being healthy. But they also have a strong sense of self. There's a lot of self-awareness. There is a good, sturdy self-esteem and a full capacity of empathy. So hear that. That's a big distinction between a healthy narcissism and then there is no empathy in the dark triad. None.
So empathy is almost like that's the flag, almost the red flag to look for.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right. So, because it makes sense in terms of being healthy to have a good sense of self-esteem, self-awareness, confidence, empathy, because otherwise it's hard to function in this world, right? So you have to have a bit of a competitive edge a little bit. And, and also looking forward to a bright future, having fantasies of what your life could be. But then there's obviously, it's like how far in you are, how self-deluded maybe, and also the empathy, and obviously like no empathy. Mm-hmm. So we're going to look at like the middle bit, because I say that, I need to ask you first, actually, is when we're talking about abusive behavior in a relationship, when someone is being abusive, whether it's hidden abuse or actually narcissist, would that abusive person usually belong to the middle, which I mean like having 1 to 4 of these criterias?
Oh, so they can still be abusive even if they have traits. And so, as I said, the treating unfairly, being shame-based, so that can already start just with traits. And so here you could have the name calling, you could have the gaslighting. There can be I also talked about fog in the previous recording. And so what that is that it's fear, obligation, and guilt. And so that is also one of the favorite tactics that a toxic person will use to use power and control over their partner. Or remember, we talked about that hidden abuse can happen in all different environments. So
Yes.
that all can occur with someone who has the traits just as much as somebody who has the full personality disorder.
Okay. Yeah. So, but I guess like if I was to put it, and maybe I'm thinking of it wrong, right? But if I was to put that person in a box, because obviously if you're dealing with someone who's like in the dark triad, no empathy, there's no, a change would be, impossible, as far as we know now, it's been possible. So that would be like, walk away. But in terms of like, if that, but the sort of like the more, I guess, the run of the mill kind of like abusive behavior, the person who inflict those kind of abusive behavior, would you say they belong usually in that middle? Like they're not particularly healthy narcissists, but they're not also the malignant one. They're like in the middle. They have like 1 to 4 of those criteria that are a bit more pronounced than other people.
So are you asking about, is that where most people reside?
Like, yeah, no. So not most people, but like the people who perform those behaviors. So let's say if you're reading like in, so let's say, for example, maybe like with your clients or, their partners, and maybe like, I'm thinking like, Facebook groups when people are like sharing, relationship advice and relationship problems. The behaviors that are usually toxic, are they usually performed by people who are in the middle of that line?
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes. So usually they are between that line and the dark triad because, believe it or not, there are a lot who can be sociopaths and they're walking around, their next door neighbors, they're, leading companies. And it's hard to believe that because I think more often than not, we think they should be wearing jumpsuits and they shouldn't be in the public population. But the truth is they are. So, Martha Stout wrote a book called The Sociopath Next Door. And I think once she wrote that book, people really realized, oh my, that is so true, that they are all over the place. And it's just that these people at that level enjoy wreaking havoc on other people's lives for their own pleasure, but they can stay off the radar so that they don't get arrested. So they can, conduct criminal behavior, but they just know how to avoid, the law. So yeah, they're usually between having traits and the dark triad.
It sounds almost like, like the character in, I may be completely wrong here, but in the Netflix series You, The Stalker, I don't know if you've seen that.
Yes.
So the guy, he's completely crazy, but he knows how to play the game.
Yep.
To look sweet. Is that what a sociopath would look like?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Maybe isolation isn't a bad thing.
Yes. There's several Netflix about that. There's one. I'm not going to remember the name.
Oh yeah, John.
Yes.
Is it John? The guy. Yeah. That's frightening. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that is a perfect example of hidden abuse right there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was, I think it was called, I think it's called John or something, right? John. Yeah. If anyone doesn't know, there's a documentary and there's a Netflix series. Obviously, if you're sensitive, maybe don't watch it. But it was fascinating. I watched the series and then I watched the documentary. And normally you can't really do both. Usually it's like one almost cancels the other. But I was all in. I was like, what? I couldn't believe. It's so unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. But real life, my mom always says that real life almost trumps the movies.
And do you know what else is a good example? Is Invisible Man. And I know that's fiction.
Oh, I don't know that.
It's fiction, but it's an excellent, excellent analogy of narcissistic abuse and punishing her for leaving him and the extreme to which the partner will go because she left him. Not he left her, because no punishment will happen if they leave, the partner. But if you leave them, they will punish you to the death, and sometimes literally. So that's a good depiction.
So almost like the trick is to do what we always used to say, like men do, like, they make us leave them. Like they give us no choice. So it looks like we're breaking up with them, but actually they left us no choice but to leave because it's just unacceptable. Is that almost what you need to do with a narcissist or like a sociopath partner, is to just leave them no choice but for them to leave you?
It would be ideal, but unfortunately, they're so dependent and they act miserable in the relationship, but they are so dependent for their ego in the other person that they'll stay for the longest time.
Yeah. Well, they feed on it, right? They feed on the. So you mentioned like there's a difference between. So if we keep this in the level of maybe like with couples, so you mentioned that like differences between female narcissists and male narcissists. Would you be open to describe those, like what the differences are?
Yes. But you know what? I just looked up. It's Dirty John, just to go back to.
Yeah. That's actually, and that's putting it nicely. Like he's lucky that he's not called anything worse. I would not have held back on that one. That's Dirty John.
It is very triggering. So, but it is a great depiction. It is a documentary, so it's a true story. It's unreal that it's a true story. But yeah. Okay. So the male and female narcissists have the same definitions, but what can be very, very different is that there is what we call a somatic narcissist, which is typically a female. And that is, a female will often use her appearance for seduction. And she becomes obsessive about like her weight, exercise, how she looks, labels. And if there's a family involved, she will be obsessed with how her family appears. And so that's one of the biggest differences, because a male narcissist is actually irritated by children, but a female narcissist is obsessed with her children being an extension of herself.
Okay, so the male narcissist will be irritated by his children, but the female is obsessed. Right. So can you explain a little bit, because the word that came up in my mind when you said about the somatic narcissist for the female was almost like stepford wives, and the moms are pushing their kids into a career they don't want, let's say like, singers, dancers, whatever, there's a name for it. Is it, obviously it's not saying that all of them are a narcissist, but is that, would you say that kind of, there usually would be one, that they would usually be like that? Not saying that all of them are.
Well, if you think about the statistic, 1 in 4 is a narcissist. So you're pretty,
Seriously?
Yeah. So you're pretty close to being accurate there. So women will manipulate it. I mean, with that being a great example, through their sexuality. So a lot of them, if we were to look at, instead of being very clinical about it, if you were to look at, a somatic narcissist, they will have, like social media, they will draw people in with their sexuality. And so you would see them having a large following of men. And so, and then how they'll use that as manipulation in a relationship is they will use that as leverage with their partner. And so they'll say, I can have anybody. And they'll, and that's shaming their partner. And, and then it's also making their partner feel trapped in many ways. And so that's another way that they use their body with their partner. And so go ahead.
No. I was just thinking, because but then, so what do men have going for them? If the narcissist, like if they're not using their looks, what is it that they are using to lock you in?
So men, they are more often using their charm. They do use their looks, but there are so many, like there are more men than women that are narcissists. So more often than not, they're using their intellect, their charm, their position of power and control. And so they will use all that to, and then extract, what they can from their partner. So that's usually how they will, but they do have hypersexuality, but that's not what they use in the beginning.
Can I just ask you, because obviously, oh, sorry, I just banged myself. Okay. So, in terms of like the male narcissists, some of them will also use their bodies. I was just wondering, is there different reasons why the woman and the male would be using their body and sexuality to lock you in? Is there a different mindset behind it?
It's the gender role. A lot has to do with the gender role. And so it's sad, but it's true, right? And so the woman is more likely going to just fall into the gender role because, she may be more focused on like the child rearing, the looks, to maintain that look of the classic family. And the male is going to have that gender role of, the powerful job or, the flashy cars. And that is if he's more of the overt. The covert is going to still want all that, but he will more rely on his partner to show all those. So
you'd have like what's it called? Like a trophy wife.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It really is. That's the difference too, right? Is that it's how they show their narcissism is through their gender roles.
Is that why? Because I'm thinking of, for example, men who are, and I know that they're not, like you said, like their narcissism is less somatic, but I was just trying to think if maybe one of the reasons why, for example, when I look at an account, let's say on social media account, and the guy is for no reason whatsoever always naked, like he'd be talking to you about why meat is good for you to eat, and he'll be like naked in his kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, naked, no, topless. So that is that why it's off-putting to, like, I'm like, I'm out. I'm like, okay, like part of me is like, okay, he's cute, like my hormones may be like feeling him, and it's like, it's nice. And like there's a part of me, the sexual part of me that's like, yeah, okay, he's hot. But there's this other part of me that is completely like put off by it because it feels off.
Yeah, I think it's an obvious flag. So I do think that most women see that as a big flag. And it's a turnoff for men too. And so you'll see that if a man sees a man doing that, oh my gosh, he can't keep his mouth shut about, he'll be going on and on about, oh my gosh, that guy has to do that in order to get women because he's too dumb to, open his mouth or just something to that effect.
And we do, as women, we do that too, right? I think there's like a difference between if it's their job to be naked. So let's say you're in the sex industry, I get it. If you're a trainer, you have to be showing skin because you want to show the results you've gotten. Like, I get all of that, but let's say if you're trying to sell pillowcases, or you're trying to sell a fab, fit, fun, right? I was trying to sell like, but they will sexualize it. They'll be like, oh, pillowcases, let's get naked. They'll be like, for no reason. Or selling towels or selling moisturizer. No one needs to be seeing your butt crack. It sounds awful. It sounds like it sounds like I'm shaming, but it's not because I have anything against people being naked per se, but it's like how it's used, and when it feels off, there's something inside. It's like, it doesn't resonate quite well. It doesn't sit in me, like, like for some people, what I'm saying or what you're saying would be like terrible for them. They'll think, oh my God, you're putting the female movement back. It's not that, because we're saying the same for the men, but it's the fact that there's something is off, and it's like, like it's just it's almost like there has to be a context.
Yeah.
There's a context if there's a context for you showing me your abs, showing me your glutes, showing me your legs, I'm all for it. I have nothing against that, and I do love watching, I love the human body. So, but it's like when it feels disingenuous, it's like you're trying to show your breast or your butt to sell me a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with it in me that it doesn't resonate. So is that where is that part of almost like a narcissistic behavior they're having?
It can be, again, just like you said, it's the context. Our marketers know that's what sells. And so women who see other women who use their bodies will often look down at that, right? And so we will stereotype them, just as men will stereotype other men that use their bodies. And so there's that, again, gender role thing that can happen. But I think that has led to now that number increasing of narcissists in today's society, because that's happening more and more. That you'll see people on the dating apps, you'll see them on their social media posting more and more, bod shots. And so that's, definitely very self-centered.
And I think there's also, it's like, I think like everything is context is important, right? So it's like, if you do it like every once in a while, like there's a nice show of, whatever, but it's like people who do it all the time. I think there's something, without context, like unless you're like, an escort or whatever is part of your industry, like, like a train or whatever it is to show your body, but it's when it's all the time. So can you explain, like, so you mentioned something to me about how, we can understand what lies beneath the passive aggressive and the grandiosity of a narcissist. Can you explain to us, like, what lies behind it? Like, what's underneath those behavior?
Yes. So a narcissist, or let's just say that cluster B person.
Okay. So when you say cluster B, is anyone that, that has like malignant or malignant behavior, toxic behavior.
And the ones that just won't change, typically.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
And so they typically are lacking an ego. And the way that they find it is through external measures. So they are really codependent. And so what that...
Oh, wait, that's super deep what you just said. Sorry. Yeah. Because actually, we would think it's the opposite. They have a crazy, huge ego, right? But actually saying because they lack an ego, they go and feed on someone else's personality to build their ego.
And so
it's like a vulture.
It is, and that's why a lot of people will often give them the nickname as a vampire.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we've got a sci-fi movie going on here, right? And so, but that is essentially what's happening. And so it doesn't look that way, right? So that's why we call it a mask. Because on the outside, what it appears to be is they have that sense of entitlement. And they have this, inflated ego. But the truth is, all of that is a facade. And what is beneath it is, an excessively poor lack of conscience. And so they don't have self-awareness. And the only way they know how to exist in the real world is to study other people. They literally will study other people. And so, go ahead.
When you say, like they have, so when they lack of an ego, and then you mentioned like they have no conscience. So it's like conscience. So what is actually, lack of ego mean then? Is it because I'm picturing when you were saying before, like almost like an empty vessel. So are all the traits they are acquiring is by observing others and they're just adding it on like a shopping list? Uh, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
So but that sounds like there's just, I mean, do they not feel it? Do they not feel really sad? It sounds really depressing.
Yeah, so here's the thing is that they really just have a marginally developed conscience. So they have the, intolerance for criticism. But what happens is they belittle other people to elevate themselves. And so that is what then gives them that sense of superiority. And it's almost like it's a snowball effect. When they start doing this, they see, oh, I feel better. And so that's almost, not almost, that's what you see happening with kids in school. And so they begin it at such an early age and they see that it works in their mind. But it really doesn't, right? Because it's a lonely existence. But they have all these flying monkeys. The flying monkeys are the kids that will align with them. But what they don't really know is that they're aligning with them out of fear, not out of connection.
Are you talking about like the school bullies?
Like the school bullies. But even when they become adults, that the people who are aligning with them, they're usually aligning to the person in the mask or aligning to the mask, right? Or out of fear.
It sounds a bit like the mafia movies, no one's really like loving the boss, but they just fear him basically.
Yeah. And so what can happen is that's why often people will choose the narcissist over the other person if they're put in a position to make a choice, because that person is usually in a place of leadership, because it's very easy for them to climb the ladder because they're willing to step on a lot of heads to get there.
Why? Because of the lack of conscience.
Exactly. And the lack of empathy.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? Because I've noticed this in a previous job I had. I was fine because I wasn't reporting to that person, but he had an assistant. Well, he still has an assistant, and his behavior is completely out of control. I mean, it's very dramatic in public, and he'll be like insulting, yelling at people, at his team, and then all of a sudden, he'd be like really like just awful. And he goes into his office, and then all of a sudden he'll be like calling his assistant, being really nice and saying, "Oh, could you just like get me a coffee?" And then I start to chat with her. And when I observed that, I was like, wow, that's like, it's almost like, and I think maybe that, I don't know if we will get into it, but it's almost like it feels like he's causing all the pain, but then he can alleviate it in a second. But his behavior is completely erratic. And I'm like, how can he even live with himself acting like this day in, day out? It's not like he's having, it's not like as if he's lost his spouse and going through a shit time and behavior is going to be erratic and, you have to let people grieve. That's just how he is, like day in, day out. And he's extremely powerful, has tons of money, doesn't really seem to care too much about people's health. Is that kind of behavior? Obviously, I know you can't diagnose someone from afar, but is that kind of like, if you were to just isolate that one behavior, would that be something that someone of that, who's malignant would sort of do?
Yes. And they do have behaviors. Remember I told you about mantrams? And so, so that's, not using clinical terms, but they can have these huge positions of leadership. And they may not have a tantrum like that in front of a lot of people, but I'll tell you what, the people that will see something to that effect are their closest staff, like their administrative assistants, et cetera. Because they do the silent treatment, they'll have, tantrums. And again, it's anything to exploit the situation or to extract, power and control. of whatever situation. And that's how they got where they are. So a lot of people in positions of power are there because they were able to get there by having that lack of empathy. And I don't want to diminish those that get there, quite honestly, with a lot of integrity.
Yeah, because of course they do exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm sure a lot of people, you know, as they hear this are probably thinking, oh, that's my CEO, or, you know.
Yeah, 100%. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's also the covered, because there's the ones who are in position of powers and they seem like the granddaddy of everybody, and everybody who's not close to them don't know them like the closest staff would know them. And they're not even, they still seem fine, but it's in the way how they have very little, they seem like they care, but they really don't.
Mm-hmm.
Or they make it all about them when it's not, you know, they would fire you and make it all about them.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of, and it's like, you know, you'd be like, what just happened?
Oh, exactly.
You're making yourself all of a sudden congratulate them and feel sorry for them when it's actually, they just don't give you the boot. So why do people stay? You know, whether it's at work, obviously at work, because there's obviously finance, and that's obviously a fear, which I understand. But like, why, even then though, like, why do people stay, whether it's a terrible boss, whether it's a partner, a marriage? Why don't people leave?
So that is an excellent question. And there are a lot of reasons, like you said. One is financial reasons. So like an example of work is that, look at the climate today. A lot of people can't leave right now. And some people have tried to move to different positions in their job, but it's not possible. And so also, if it was a better climate, people could possibly look for a different job. But there are many people who that's just not an option because there isn't a better job out there for them. Now, there also is such a thing as trauma bond, which is also known as Stockholm Syndrome. And what that is that what has occurred over time is that there is actually a chemical reaction that occurs between the two people. So there is a oxytocin and epinephrine and adrenaline connection that happens each time that the person with the personality disorder gains any kind of trust. So, for example, when there's the love bombing, that each time that happens, they'll get a dopamine hit. And so even though there's that cycle of abuse, that what's around the corner after that is devaluing and discarding, the person's willing to wait for that dopamine hit because they know it's going to come.
You mean the one on the receiving end of the abuse? And
so that's what develops the trauma bond. And so a lot of people sometimes will say, that sounds like brainwashing. And it kind of does, because if you think about it, it is the same thing that happens with addiction. And so the narcissist is addicted to the relationship because they are in it for what can the relationship do for me? The target or the other person in the relationship, they become codependent if they weren't already getting into it because of that dopamine hit, the oxytocin. It's a chemical cocktail. And so that's one reason. if someone doesn't have that trauma bond, there's a lot of other things. There's a spiritual reason. A lot of people really have this strong adherence to their either religious practices or spiritual reasons, and then cultural. And
Of course.
so those are other reasons why people will stay in such a relationship regardless of what's happening. Even if, let's say, that their religions say that abuse is a reason to leave, for some reason they'll still say that divorce is not accepted in their religion.
Yeah. And I think this is also, I mean, that's why actually, obviously there are obviously cultures and communities where divorce is just not an option. And that's how you'll see why, you'd see people, being killed basically, because maybe that person so maybe maybe you can't divorce, but maybe like internally in the relationship, both parties know that it's over, or the person has kind of like almost said like, we're staying married, but this is over.
Mm-hmm.
And the other person is going to take it so badly, the narcissist, because that's his drug being taken away. He's now empty and he's going to be like, fuck this. If I can't have it, no one else. And then,
exactly.
Obliterate the other person. And so like either that person, one kills the person or the person tops themselves off basically,
And that is exactly what they say. If I can't have this person,
Mm-hmm.
no one else can.
Yeah.
And the reason why they feel like they can't divorce this partner is because this is the hardest relationship to prove that it's abuse. It is so hard to prove in the court system. And so they feel like it's easier to stay than try to prove that it's abuse.
But it's like, when we did the other episode, and I'll just so that in case if people want to, because we talked a lot about, almost like the reasons and around behind it. Let me just see. It is episode 20. I say it's episode 28 called "Did You Just Gaslight Me?" So episode 28, did you just gaslight me? And we go over a lot of things as well. And then I think because like you were saying, about I'm saying this because you were mentioning how it's very hard to prove in court. And it is like, but maybe also part of it is because you can't really remember, it's that like that cognitive dissonance, that confusion. You're like, well, maybe it was me who did that.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I didn't, So where you don't feel convinced, when you're not sure, did it really happen because it's so crazy? If you're not convinced yourself, you're not going to convince the judge, right? So, or you may find it difficult to if the judge is not aware of this kind of relationships. But it is all, and there's the whole shame behind it as well. People are not sure, they feel there's a lot going on, right? So,
oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up because that's another reason. And I didn't think about it this time. So, yeah, cognitive dissonance is also a reason. And because many sometimes don't even think that their partner's the abuser, they think they are because their partner has convinced them that they're the reason for the problems in the marriage or the relationship.
So would like an extreme example be like, well, you made me hit you.
Yeah.
It's your behavior that made me hit you. And I'm not saying that
if you didn't do this, I wouldn't treat you this way.
And I like to say this, like, I'm not saying there is, a lot of the time things build up and there's often a reason people do what they do. But the difference is between someone who is toxic and someone who isn't, in my mind, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can all fight and we can all, and, women and men and whether it's gender or non-gender, linear, any human beings, let's just say any human beings, all of us can drive someone else nuts and make them want to hit us. I'm just saying, like, we can. But the difference between someone who's toxic and not toxic is that someone who's not toxic, one is going to know when to walk away, put the brakes so that they don't hit you. They may hit a pillow, they may go for a walk, they'll still feel angry. And if they do end up slapping you, let's say if you do end up like getting physical, they will feel terrible afterwards. Oh, yeah. But genuinely. And they will go and seek help, so they won't do it again. Whereas I think someone who's toxic will be like, well, you made me. Yeah, most people, we all drive each other crazy and make each other do stuff, right? Like 100%. Human beings are complex. But there is a difference. And I think if someone says to you, it's your fault and I shouldn't feel bad and I'll do it again. Wow.
And there's the learned helplessness that
That's
occurs,
yeah.
right? Because
say that again.
The learned helplessness that occurs because
what's that?
You're in that situation every day and you're so accustomed to be treated that way all the time.
Yeah.
So you just don't even believe that something else could be better for you. Right. And and they convince you of that too. No one else is going to love you the way that I love you. And by this time, you also are probably exhibiting, major high anxiety, possibly panic disorder. There may even be substance abuse issues at this point. And so they will actually weaponize your vulnerabilities against you. And so that further makes you feel helpless. So that's another example of learned helplessness.
Yeah. I think maybe like a sign is like if someone feeds on being powerful when you're down, that's not a good sign, right? If they're going, and also if someone says to you, no one's ever going to love you the way I do, you need to say, I hope not, because the way you love me destroys me.
Yes.
It's just, I never love you as much as I do. Well, I'll take less love this time, actually. if that much love is what happens, I'm good to not have it.
Yeah, because you're right. This isn't love. But they've been so beat down physically and psychologically that, they're so numb to it at this point.
Yeah. And it's the new normal, right? And I think that's, I know you mentioned that, you mentioned as well in the other episode and also briefly today was that, not everybody enters a toxic relationship like that being codependent from the start. It's just, it's almost like, they can lure you in. But obviously there's for some other people where they mistake passion with violence. Violence for passion, sorry. They mistake anxiety for passion. They mistake all these things because of maybe their upbringing or their experience in life around love. And they think that unless there is crazy fighting and crazy high level of anxiety, they don't think that person loves them. So, both people are almost serving a purpose in each other's lives and, feeding something that they think they need. Did I understand that right? Like that not everyone walks in codependent.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So let's say if you've decided to leave the person, right? You've gathered the courage to leave. Like, how would you advise someone to go about this? If someone's really with someone who's, highly toxic, malignant, how would you advise someone? What are the steps to take? Because like you said, it's not always safe to do.
Right. You have to be very careful. And so the first thing is to create a safety plan. And a safety plan, so if you are in a family, you're obviously going to have to safety plan with your children. And so that can be difficult, but your children, they probably know that the situation isn't healthy. So it'd be important to talk to them about the safety plan, but closer to the designated time that you're going to leave. You also need to run through all the different scenarios of when to leave. And the, better time to leave is when the partner or the abuser will not be at home. So the safety plan would include, the time, the day, also to have in place where you're going to go and to have those people, notified to make sure that you have these trusted people that won't discuss this with anybody. And so this can be friends, it can be family, but these are people that know about your situation and know how precarious this is and the necessity of it being extremely confidential. Also, to keep evidence, so documenting threats, documenting any kind of abuse at all, like if it's financial, taking pictures if there's physical, making sure that you have dates for everything that happens, and then set money aside. And, no matter how you need to do it. So it takes time. You really have to decide and then take time to do it carefully. And then you can request police to escort you when you leave if you need to just leave when they're there, because sometimes the abuser will know that you're planning to leave and they will actually monitor every move you make.
Because they can probably, it's like an energy thing, right? They can feel that you're not in this as much as you used to be, right?
They can tell that when you're checked out.
Mm-hmm. Like anyone can, right? Most of us can tell when our partner, we don't have to be abusive to tell that. You can tell when someone's checked out. They're like, you're not feeling this.
And that's why I always say too, if you can, try to just act normal, because you do want to be able to leave safely, but it is very hard to do when you're just that hurt. And make sure you have important documents like the originals of identification papers, legal papers. At the very least, if you just need to make copies, medications, copies of keys, address book, clothing, but try not to take too much that it's obvious that you're leaving. And if you need to, get protective orders, because that may need to take place because they do want to punish. And so you might also need, if it's a very dangerous situation, you might want to take shelter at a local shelter. And so it just depends on how dangerous your current situation is.
Yeah. Is, I was wondering, because I guess like the longer you are in a relationship, the more dangerous it is to leave, right? In those situations?
Typically, yes. Yeah. Each situation is unique of it, but it can be really dangerous the longer you're in it, because you have more assets. They're also in it for the long haul, right? They never expect that you're going to leave at that point. And they care more about all those assets than they care about their partner. So they're willing to protect those no matter what the cost.
Mm-hmm. And when you say assets, it could be finance, children.
Yeah. The children really are pawns, though. They do not care about the children, but unfortunately, they act like they do. And so that's one way that they punish, is they will take their partner to court over and over again and fight for full custody, fight for 50-50. And the truth is, they may not have ever been an engaged partner or parent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, I mean, you see that, I mean, in my age group, I'm 41. I've seen, people like, go through divorce with kids and stuff. And some people are just really reasonable. Yeah. They don't like each other. They may, be mad or insult each other every once in a while. Like, but then there's the other range of people who their partners will just fight them over the kids, like even when they're supposed to be seeing them, they'll fight them over, they'll make it difficult for them. And it's like, it's really ugly to hear. So, I guess like to round up, like, because obviously the longer you're in it, the harder it is to leave and so on and so forth. So if at the beginning of dating, like what are some sure signs that okay, this is going down a very toxic road, this person is toxic? I know you mentioned love bombing, but then obviously some people can do that. They still, I guess, like not all of them are completely malignant. They could just be a bit like in the middle. They can still change. They still have empathy. Although like that's obviously kind of one of the red flags, I think. But like, what are the flags you'd say to someone like if this happens or this is said, like you need to be careful and watch out and maybe consider not dating that person again?
I think that they are very jealous. And so they'll often say things, that are about you and them only. And so they will even want a lot of your time and not consider other things like your job, your family. And so those are big flags. And
Like they want to have you all to
all
themselves,
to themselves. Yeah. And, they'll usually talk in extremes. And so, meaning about emotions. And so, even though they're not very good with emotions, but they'll be, wanting to say, I love you really, really fast. And it's fast and you'll feel uncomfortable about it. And most women do, but for some reason they still stick with them. But this is a huge
because
flag.
we have this.
Yeah.
It's because we have this shit show of dating where like guys don't stick, right? So you've got that's how the crazy wins, because you've got the crazy says I love you after 3 days, like he's in, okay.
Yeah.
He doesn't get easy, right?
Because then you have the guys that are the opposite. They're so detached.
Yeah, they just ghost you.
But then that could be the covert, right? The covert guy is very detached. So, but they can still do the love bombing in the beginning. So, yeah. And then also either they want to talk all about themselves or they only want to talk about you and not a thing about themselves.
Can you go, what do you mean? Because I like in what way? Because I guess some people are private. Like for example, me, like I often being told that I don't say a lot about myself, but I have friends who know a lot about me. But I guess on this podcast is this is the most I'm opening up. Actually, it's very therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
But it's like, so I talk a lot on here. I've opened it up, but I don't. I'm often told that I know it takes time to get to know me. I'm the person like, I will open up and I'll give you everything, but I need time.
But that's healthy.
So at the beginning, I want to know about the other person more.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I do talk endlessly after people says, "Oh my God, you're a talker," like on a date. And I can see their eyes like glazing over. And I'm like, okay, I gotta shut up. So what do you mean by they'll make it all up? Like, can you
can sense that they're studying you, or
okay.
you do have this intuitive feeling that, wait, I'm sharing more about me and he's not sharing anything at all.
Right. Okay.
Right. You definitely know the
Yes.
scale is tipped.
Yes. It's almost, it feels a violation, because it's like, I feel like I've given all this to that person, but the other person is not. It's almost like you, I guess, I was like almost like they're using a word of a therapist, but not as a therapy, because obviously when you're in therapy, the therapist is not telling you about their lives, right? But so it's more one-sided, right? Which is obviously normal. That's the framework. But in a dating situation, getting to know someone, you'd have, if someone shares something with you, it's pretty normal to then go open up and share something too, right? You can't just like let that person hang.
Yeah.
You'll feel like you're hanging in. Yeah. Okay.
I love that you said one-sided, because that's the thing is it does have a lot of one-sidedness even in the beginning. But what they do is they'll kind of mask it as, love and romance. But it's really not the emotional intimacy, because they don't know intimacy. So it's like, this is very true. They get a lot of their information about how to be in a relationship from rom-coms or, novels. So it really isn't intimate. And so you can kind of, you can pay attention to that.
Yeah, that's probably why the love bombing is one of their tools, because that's what rom-com is, right? Rom-com's all about either love bombing or being cruel and mean, and then somehow still end up together,
Mhm.
right? So yeah.
And if they ask to get on your social media before they talk to you, don't,
Okay. Yeah.
because they're wanting to study you. And that's what they do. They want to study you, to get to know you, so that they can use all that as a weapon and a tool to control you.
So I'll challenge that a little bit in terms of, because I do encourage, women to, like, let's say, especially with online dating, try and find out, like, through conversation almost, what their last name is or something, just because you have to check, because people are married out there going online on the apps. And then if you hadn't gone and checked the social media, you wouldn't have known they were in a relationship. So I think there's that, there's, doesn't mean you add as a friend. It
Right.
doesn't mean you become friends on Facebook, but you can do, I think there's a level of due diligence. That doesn't mean that you are studying someone. It just means that you're going, okay, well, either is that person drunk every night, two is in a relationship, are they married, that kind of stuff, which I think is, like, good to know.
You know what? I agree with that. So, but look at the intention behind that. So, you're
Yeah.
trying to do it for a safety factor, right? And
Yes.
you
Yeah,
can't
absolutely.
always make
Yeah.
that discernment about what the other person is using it for. Again, here's perspective and context. But
Yeah.
I would be hesitant to let them, like, to add them to my social media. So
Right.
that's why I think it's
Yeah.
so important, especially for women, but men can be victims too. But to have, all the safety settings on social media, because that
Yeah.
is often what they're doing, is studying you. Now, I have friends, man, that they do the driver's license criminal check thing, and they do. And I say go for it.
Yeah, the background
Yeah,
check. So I think it's bigger in the US. I don't think in the UK. I'm not sure we can do this, but in the Facebook groups I go in, like, it's for women only, and we talk about dating and things like that, and we talk a lot about safety. And I say a lot. We do talk sometimes about safety, and I know some of them, they literally do a background check, and one of them, she did a background check, and the guy had been in and out of prison, but, like, for serious assault. And had she not done that, she wouldn't have known. So it's like, it sounds scary to get someone to knowing people are doing background checks on each other, I guess, it's like, in terms of, like, violation of privacy. But at the same time, there's this thing of, like, well, like, he's a repeat offender of something that's not good for a woman to be exposed to, or anyone, regardless, woman or man. So yeah, I think in the US there is a way. I'm sure there is a way to do it here in the UK, but yeah, it's, I guess, like you said, it's context, right? Like, because I think any behavior can be looked as stalking or as reasonable,
right.
right? So yeah, nowadays, we all check each other's social. I mean, all of us check each other's social media, but I think maybe, like, what I would say to people is that, have one for business and one for personal. So if someone wants to check out your business one, for example, you feel more comfortable with that, or probably one either you need for your business, and then you can have a private one, like, private Facebook for your friends and, people who truly know you. That's also one way of protecting yourself a little bit.
Yeah, truly. And so I think it's really important. And just like you and I were talking about, uh, you know, that there are female narcissists too, that men are needing to do it just as much. So,
100%. Yeah.
I think that it's just important for everybody. And, they call it conscientious dating. And so that's what everybody needs to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's good to, you have to be responsible, right? Without going over the line of the crazy, because, that's, again, like, people get insecure in relationships and they start to look at all the pictures and, I think we can all be guilty of that and going, oh my God, that's it, he's cheating. But then it's about, you have to look into what is that behavior is saying to you? Like, why are you feeling this way? Stay away from that behavior. It's not helping you, but I think it could also, obviously, some people could be enabled if they are in a relationship, like you were saying, for example, with a man or woman using their social media as a pawn and a weapon against their partner or whoever they're dating, right? And it becomes mean. I think if someone is mean, if someone's open and just a bit flirty, whatever, but they don't put it in your face, shove it in your face as a power dynamic trick, then they're fine. But if they're using it, keep mentioning it all the time, there's really no need, right? It's
and what's so interesting about this is that it's hidden, right? They hide that they use it as a weapon at first. They'll start saying, oh, I saw that on your Facebook. But then when you're in the relationship deep, that's when they start weaponizing it.
So what's the difference between at the beginning and when they're deep in the relationship?
So that's why we also call it hidden abuse, because they hide the fact that they're so deceptive in the beginning. So, for example, that they used your Facebook account or Instagram as a weapon, they'll say, oh, I just, want to get to know you better. And they may make a couple positive remarks about the things that they saw on your social media in the beginning. But once they feel that you're committed in the relationship, that's when they start to use it against you.
Yeah, because they don't want you to be too confident, right? Because that doesn't serve them.
Right? That'll take the mask off. They'll take their own mask off, and they don't want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And also, I guess, like, as a final thing, like, if anyone also, if you share, for example, your dream or plans with someone, and they don't even listen it out, and they just like put them down within under 2 seconds flat, that's also, I think, a big telling sign. Like, they don't even want you to have hopes and dreams of your own.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
That's terrible behavior. Okay, so I don't know, do we have time to even go, because there's so much to talk about, but I was wondering if, maybe we could do another episode about how, once you've come out of it, how do you recover and how do you trust another person again, right? We could do that in another episode.
Yeah. Because that would be a huge episode, uniquely on its own, because there's a lot to recovery.
Oh, perfect. Okay, well then we'll do that. We'll do that bit another time then. That's okay. Great. Absolutely. There's always so much to cover with you. I never really want to stop the call, but so Shannon, thank you so much for today. I am going to ask the same 2 questions to all my guests. And I've already asked them last time, but wonder if that's changed. So what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
So I thought I'd just come up with something different for this time. And I would tell myself to lighten up on the makeup and and that I don't need liquid courage to be myself.
Yes. Yeah. Those 2 are big ones. But it is, right? It is. Yeah.
I was so insecure, and I just remember, that, gosh, my age group, we were just talking about this, that we used alcohol a lot to gain our courage to be open and friendly. And so, I would tell myself that just be you.
Yeah. And, alcohol is, it is fun and nice, but it's true. It's like, you can't, it's all about, again, like how much, when you use it and all of that, right? It's all about context. And if you use it with relationships to other people, it becomes a problem. But it's, I think most of us can relate to that. So, and what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
I don't put up with, again, the shaming that people do and intolerance. I just speak up.
Yeah. Good. No, that's good. Can you please tell us where people can find you and include what you do online? Because I know you do online therapies now.
So I am on my website's unlockingfortitude.com. And my Instagram is Shannon Higgins LPC. And then my telehealth, you can access it on my webpage. And I don't have a support group yet lined up for telehealth. I have a therapy group, but we can only do therapy in our state that we're licensed in. So I can only do therapy for people in the state of Texas. Yeah. But I can do consulting for people outside of Texas. And so they can still reach me through telehealth, but it would be consulting. So
what's the difference?
There's not too much of a difference. It would be more of case management, just like what coaches do. So
yes.
And really being about more of, what to do with your resources, and then what can you do with your day-to-day life. So there's not too much of a difference, but there's just more of that I have to explain liability, etc.
Yeah, that's right. So but people can get in touch if they want to know more, and I'll put all the links in the show notes. But it's great that, and obviously anyone in Texas, if they can't go to you because of the isolation, they can still do the online or calls. And anyone outside can still get in touch with you for consulting. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me again today, Shannon. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I just love doing this. I love, spreading the awareness, and I love your platform.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shannon. And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram. I have 2 accounts. One is at Tool for This Shit Podcast and at Health Expert Angie. Link in the show notes. See you next week, and until then,
using health inappropriately.